All right, Panther Lair, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Panthers' victory over the Duke Blue Devils this past Saturday in Cameron Indoor Stadium. Now, the last time these two teams matched up in Pittsburgh, after the game, I detailed out several pick-and-roll situations that Cal Filipowski was involved in, why they were effective, what Pitt tried to take away, what worked, what didn't work. So I want to revisit that here, talking about the adjustments that I think Pitt made, what worked, what didn't work, but also talking about what I think they were willing to concede this time. And I want to stay with that point for this particular video because I think the thing that Pitt was willing to concede is Cal Filipowski having to make plays off the dribble. Now, this works well because they were, the Blue Devils were missing Jeremy Roach and Mark Mitchell, so not as many weapons around the perimeter and not that steady presence that Roach has been at point guard. But regardless, Pitt was willing to live with Cal Filipowski putting the ball on the floor, even though he had some success with that in Pittsburgh. So let's talk about it right here. One of the things I thought was really interesting and a gamble on Pitt's part, but just sticking to their strategy is at the first media timeout, Ish Leggett checks in for Jalen Lowe and Ryan Young checks into the game. And at that point, for the most part, Blake Hinson took Cal Filipowski going forward. Now, this did two things. One, it put a defender who is probably willing to play a little closer to Cal Filipowski on him, but it also kept Federico underneath the basket. And so Pitt was willing to say, hey, if you're going to put the ball on the floor because Hinson's going to pressure you more, you're still going to have to meet our shot blocker at the rim. Now, in the last game, the bigs were almost always involved in pick and rolls that Cal Filipowski was involved in, and that kept the shot blocking always away from the rim. Pitt did a much better job of not allowing that to happen, and even when they did, and you're going to see that in clips here, they kept Hinson down low, and they always tried to meet him outside the circle with two defenders, and it really paid off in this particular game. Let's get into it. So here, like I said, after that first media timeout, Hinson's going to be on Filipowski. Now, I don't know really why Filipowski didn't launch here, but he ends up putting the ball on the floor. You'll see, again, Federico is going to wall him off. And this turns out to be a missed three by Proctor. Hinson, really good night on the boards. A big reason is because he's pretty much his assignment, wherever he took, he was always going to be camping there, or because he was always involved with actions involving Filipowski, he ended up being under the rim quite a bit. So same thing here. Look, Ish Leggett, I got to say, did an awesome job defending Filipowski on the perimeter in certain situations, ball screen situations, sometimes just one-on-one. Pitt did not, as you know, switch any type of actions with Filipowski in the first game. And given the fact that I thought their guards could at least pester him or force him to put on the ball on the floor, maybe it was worth a shot. They never did it. Here we see this a lot in this game. We'll talk about it in other videos. But you'll see how pesky Ish Leggett is, just making this really tough for Filipowski. He ultimately gets fouled because Guillermo just slaps him on the arm here. But just a really good job by Ish Leggett making his life tough. Here we do see he's going to attack Federico. Federico does a decent job going stride for stride, but because Hinson is going to kick over and Stewart is really not an offensive threat at all, sometimes Hinson was on Blake's early, prior to that first media timeout, and you'd see Hinson camping in the same position because they had Blake's here. They wall him off. He's got to kick out. And decent contest, missed shot. Another rebound here coming for Hinson. So here we go in the second half. Filipowski's going to try to attack with a little bit of momentum here. And Guillermo does a good job of shuffling his feet. And ends up drawing the charge. And in this last one here, kind of a similar thing. ISO here for Filipowski. Does a little bit of work. Tries to use some momentum. Get himself going here towards the basket. I think, you could argue, does Hinson draw this charge here? He's certainly outside of the restricted circle, but right when I make that pause, I think his feet are outside here, but you're also in Cameron Indoor, and maybe Filipowski is in the process of shooting, or he's in the process of leaping here or whatever, so that doesn't turn out to be a charge, and this ends up being Filipowski and one. But that was one of the few times he was able to get to the basket for a layup. Again, Pitt's strategy was make him put the ball on the floor and wall him off at the rim if possible. And they did a really good job of that. And then being disciplined on the backside when Filipowski would kick out and rotate the ball for threes. Duke did make a lot of threes, but I think they figured, or Capel figured, hey, let's let these guys try to beat us from three and not let Filipowski beat us from point blank or have him beat us from three.